Hi everyone, welcome to the channel, Merlin here, and welcome to Manor Lords. Today's video is my top tips on how to get started, especially for you new players out there looking for a way forward and what to do. I hope to think that by the end of this video you will have enough information and insights to give yourself a launching pad, to give yourself a good start. I wouldn't say a perfect start, but a good start. Initially you'll start with 5 settlers in a settler's camp who are homeless, an oxen at a hitching post, and some basic supplies to get the ball rolling. And the idea is with that to kind of start building up or constructing your housing and your work buildings in a way that it can be balanced out. Too much housing early on means you're going to run through your food before you get any. Not enough housing means basically you're going to have a homeless issue whereby it might affect your growth number up here, because unless you get over 50%, no new families will come to the village. So how do we start? So first of all, look at the region you're in. This is my tip to you. First of all, see what the region kind of gives you, both in location, so where you can build your town, and also in resources. Check to see what rich deposits you have. So this region has a rich deposit of berries, so you know that your food is not going to be an issue early on. You might find that you might have a rich deposit in iron, which will come very, very handy later on. This one doesn't. You then also want to look at what sort of farming fertility you have available to you. So basically, what's the wheat situation like? If it's in green, it's in a good yield. If it's in yellow or kind of amber, the yield is a little bit less. And red, obviously, rich none at all. And that's the same for flax and barley and rye. Now, rye is more forgiving as far as the land is concerned, but you do need to allocate development points to get to that. So you won't get that straight away. So once you've ascertained the location of your town and what kind of the region can do for you, it's time to get to work. So I said it's a bit of a balancing out on what you actually need to do regarding getting families to work in your resources. However, with logging camp generating timber, and timber required for virtually every house, you need that as priority. That's the first thing you need, your logging camp. Once your logging camp is constructed, allocate your family. I said family rather than individual because although this says 2, that's 2 families. So each family of 3 people will always allocate to one job. So you'll have 3 people kind of collecting timber, for example. Once the logging camp is done, in this case definitely get your forager hut up and running, because that will give you your berries and your food. Third on the list is your granary, and once that's been built, you get a family member in there, and then they gather not only the supplies from the forager hut, but any supplies left over that you were given at the start of the game that are currently sitting outside in the elements. And finally, a storehouse. Same reason. Storehouse deals with everything but food and timber. Timber doesn't go into the storehouse. In fact, timber doesn't go anywhere. So straight away, you've got 4 buildings and 4 families out of 5 already been used. Yeah, not ideal. And I can see, people say, well, how's that going to work? How's it going to work? The storehouse is initially just to kind of like get the ball rolling. And once you've gathered all the kind of exposed supplies, you can then put them back into what I would call the building list of people. The logging camp, once you've got enough timber that you deem for the time being, take them out of the logging camp, allocate them back into the work detail for building. Now all this hopefully shouldn't take too long, but you never know what's going to happen. But in the meantime, for every month that goes past and you haven't got housing in place, obviously your growth is going to go down. And with this particular game, I got as low as 45%. So it took a little while to get back up to 50% with people coming in. So this takes us on to the housing. Now, initially, you don't need that much housing because you've only got 5 families to actually assign. And when you're building the burgage pot, which is your housing, there are 2 ways of doing it. You can either just build to the point that you have multiple houses, one house per site, and that'll allocate 1 family. Or alternatively, you can allocate it with an annex. And what that means is that you'll have one family goes into the main house and one family goes into the annex. So straight away, by building 3 of these, you've already allocated your housing situation and given you space for one more. What I would always say to you is don't lose sight that you will continue need to build housing to get people in, because the quicker you get them in, the better. Now, once those houses are built, there are different types of things you can do. So in the back, say for example, the back garden, you can allocate your chicken coop to give you a steady supply of eggs. And again, if you've got 2 families, that's twice the supply. But it needs wealth. You need your coinage. And early on, you'll only have 50 coins to begin with. And I'm afraid to say, the next tip for you is to use half of that on another hitching post. Because when you're building early on, it's one of those first things you want to get sorted before you even start building the housing. In fact, probably before you start building the other buildings, is that one ox can only transport 1 piece of timber at any one time. So if he's transporting it to one location and you've got to kind of put 4 logs in there, it's going to take ages. So that's why I get a second hitching post in. And you can decide where you locate that second hitching post. In fact, if the first one's so far away from town, then obviously move it closer. So again, you're probably only going to have enough wealth initially to do 1 chicken coop. Now, I selected chicken coop because chicken coop is the only one out of all these that doesn't require a family working as an artisan. Everything else does. We'll come to that in a minute. The other type of burgage pot that you want to look at is the vegetables. Now, in this situation, the longer the plot, the better. So again, look to do the same thing. Look to build in with an annex, but also build as long as you want or long as possible, because the bigger the plot, the more vegetables comes out of it. The eggs is not done that way. Neither is the goat hides that you see on here either. Size of the plot in the goat hide and the chicken coop plays no part in the yield. The vegetables is the only one it does. So you've got your housing in place. You're going to need a marketplace, because a marketplace affects, and you'll get an alert straight away, your marketplace affects your growth. Because as soon as you start gathering berries into the granary, whoever it is, whether it's the forager or whether it's the granary family, will then generate an automatic store for the marketplace, and then that is then generated out to the housing in question. And the only way you can get from level 1 to level 2 or level 2 to level 3 is to make sure that you have completed the requirements. So you're going to need a well straight away. You're going to need a church pretty much straight away. And then basically these tell you what sort of different types of foods you need and what sort of clothing. So this then goes on to the next part of, well, what do I need then to build to make sure I can level up my housing? So you need a clothing store, which means you're going to need a tannery. Now, if you're operating on a goat hide in the back of the building, or if you're operating from a hunting camp, eventually the tannery will turn any animal hide into leather. That'll then go into the marketplace and that'll form part of your clothing store. But again, you're going to have to balance out what you have available in families, because once that person goes in the tannery, it comes out of the work, they come out of the work detail. Now, once you get lucky enough to get to level 2, you'll see that the required influence then goes to include a tavern as well, and obviously increasing your church. So what I would say to everybody really when you're doing this is treat the church, the marketplace, and the impending tavern as your centre circle, or centre rectangle, where we're going to decide what direction you want to go, and build your housing around it. And the reason behind that is that the circle of influence, as I call it, whether it's the marketplace or the church or the tavern, reaches out to the nearest houses first. So if you've not got enough food, so for example, let's click on the marketplace and we'll hover over food variety. So you've got one building in the top there that's orange with no food at all. And you've got other buildings which are amber because they've only got one level bit of food at the moment. So the point I'm trying to make on here is if you build it in a circle, those on the outside will stand a better chance quite rather than if you kind of go, if you build all houses all the way down through here to the borderline, these houses at the bottom will virtually never get any supplies, which means they'll never be able to be upgraded. But then the question is, why do I need to upgrade a building? So once you upgrade a burgage pot to level 2, two things happen. Firstly, you start getting wealth from the family as a natural, so they start paying wealth to the pot. And secondly, you're able to upgrade to better extensions. So, for example, all these 8 extensions become available if they're relevant. So, well, exception of the Armour's Workshop. So you'll notice I've got the Fletcher's Workshop on this one. And that's because it makes bows for the military. So it's kind of twofold that the quicker you can get them up to level 2, it gives you value, money in your pot, and also ability to do better artisan working. Additionally, I would suggest getting at least one building to level 2 early on and converting it to the Fletcher shop for the reason I've mentioned regarding war bows. Is as long as they have a supply of planks, they will continually build those bows. Now initially you only need about 36 just for one military unit. So this is when then you need to get your trading post in. Get your trading post in, start doing trade, and you will make money off the back end of it. So for example here, you set your limit and you get 5 coins for every war bow that you export. So that's again where your money will start coming in. Now by this point, hopefully when you start building your building level up, you will be able to allocate development points. So you can see here you go from one village, so you start off with a small village, you then become a medium village, large village, small town, and so on. And each time you get to a level you get a development point, but you have to get to a certain point. So for example here it says that I need to have at least 10 buildings at level 1 or higher. So I've only built 9, so I need to have 10, and I need to have at least 5 of them to be at level 2 or above. So I could have 10 buildings, 5 level 2, 5 level 1, and that will satisfy that criteria. At which point then you get your development points. And then you can allocate accordingly what you think is best for you. So if you've got a mine-rich area, you might decide that you want to go down the mining route. So you go to charcoal burning first, and then you go to deep mining. Because mine's more of a farming area, I've gone the route down having a heavy plough in the field, so it cuts down the time it takes to plough the field, and a bakery in the back of the housing, which means I don't need a communal oven, so the artisans will create the bread for me within one of their houses. But this has got to be your decision. You've got to decide what you feel is right for you based on your region. So the 3 areas I want to cover with you to finish off with is to revisit the trading posts, because there are 2 types of trade. There are minor trade and there are major trade in each area. The minor trades don't need initially a trade route, but the major ones must have a trade route. So for example, in here, if I wanted to trade roof tiles, I need to gather 214 coins just for the trade route to open it up, and then I can set what I want to get rid of. So bear that in mind. And also bear in mind, if you do a major route, trade route, you need a horse. Because what happens is that you'll see on the bigger map, they call them trading points. It's kind of like a work in progress thing. But basically what happens is the horse will take your supplies to those trading points to give you what you need. If you don't have a horse, it takes a lot longer, and they use the oxen instead, or a mule. And you also need to make sure you've got people in. But again, one person in the trade route might not do everything you want, so you might need more than one. Second, farming. We've glossed over it initially, but I'm going to cover it a bit more now. You need your farmhouse before you do anything else. And I would suggest initially making your fields for wheat so you can get your bread sorted out. Now what I've done here is I started up with 2 fields last year. They were planted and they were harvested. I then built a 3rd field, slightly bigger one. So these now go fallow. And what that means by going fallow, it means there's more fertility. We'll come back to you, which means bigger yield. So you give me a year to do nothing. And then you do that. So you want to try and kind of alternate. Now you notice I haven't done with barley yet. And this is because this is still an early video in the sense of what you should be doing initially. Barley is for your tavern, which you'll have in a later time. Finally, in this video, the probably most important building that you'll ever want to build early on, and you'll need stone and planks for this, is your manor house. Because once you've built your manor house, you can start charging taxes. First of all, this tithe, do not do anything with it early on. As you can see here, the percentage of the food, surplus food that you supply to the church will give you influence. And that's fine to build up your influence for claiming regions again for combat. And again, that's a later video. But initially, you will suddenly realize your food is just running out. Leave it at 0. I would suggest doing land tax at 10% to begin with. And how that works is the treasury, which is your treasury in the top right hand corner here, at the end of each month will take 10% of what's ever in this pot. So for example, if the month was to end now, 15 coins would go into the treasury. And you need your treasury to kind of hire your mercenaries and all that. So that really is where your starting point is. So just to recap, get your login count sorted out. Get your farming sorted out. Get your housing sorted out. The influence, the circle of influence. And also, by the end of it, you should be able to look in at woodcutters as well, because the woodcutter lodge gives you your fuel, which you'll need. But again, all of this will depend on how your growth rating is and how your families are. So anyway, I hope that that's been beneficial to you for starters. Watch this space for future tip videos on Manor Lords, especially when you get into mid-game. Other than that, thank you for watching, enjoy the game, and I'll see you soon.